Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the very first episode of Kollectiv Knowledge. I'm your host, Shane Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at FFShaneB. And before I introduce my guest and mentor and friend, just want to explain to you what the idea behind this show is. And that is basically to take people like our guest tonight and the other individuals that I've got on the list and kind of peek behind the curtain just to see and get to know more about them, how they got started in the fantasy industry, when they started playing, and all that, and maybe some other fun questions here or there too. But just to kind of get to know people outside of the realm of fantasy football and get to know our brothers and sisters in the fantasy football industry a little bit better. So without further ado, my first guest, and as mentioned before, my friend and mentor, is Geoff Lambert of GoingFor2.com. Geoff, how you doing tonight?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on. And, that this is your first episode. It's kind of cool to be on the first of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on the first of a couple of friends' shows, and actually Jay Felicio, I was the first guest on Pod with Upside.
That's right.
So I know what it's like. You probably feel like I'm setting the bar low, but I see it as setting the bar high because you're awesome. So, before we get started, anything you want to plug, anything, where can people find you, et cetera?
Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter at Geoff Lambert 77. The website's goingfor2.com. If you go to YouTube, you can look for our podcast network. It's Going for Two Live podcast network. We basically have, I think, 7 shows now that pretty much go most of the day through the week. And just cranking out podcasts, cranking out content, getting ready for the season coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah, I know. I'm very ready for the season. I think a lot of people are. Training camp is coming up on us, and I think a lot of people, including myself, are very, very excited for that. So, all right, let's get rolling into this show sheet. I am actually in the middle of blasting this out to some retweet groups real quick. So first question, Geoff, that I have for you is, when did your first fantasy football league start?
I think it was late 90s. It was like 96, 97, somewhere in that range. A friend of mine asked me about it. I'd always been like a stat nerd. Like even in high school, I would bring the paper on Tuesdays before I even played fantasy football. And I just wanted to know, like, who's the number one offense, who has the most touchdowns in the league, just things I just wanted to know in case it came up in a conversation, I can talk about it. So when he offered this fantasy football thing, I was like, all right, cool. I've never played before. Let's, I'll jump into this. I think it was Yahoo's inaugural season.
Oh, nice.
I wasn't one of the ones that did the notepads and the Excel
notepad and paper.
Yeah, I wasn't quite there, but yeah, I think it was Yahoo's first year doing fantasy football. We got on that. It was actually an IDP league, which back then it wasn't even called IDP. It was just you just had defensive players. We didn't have like cool names for anything. And yeah, that league started all the way back then, and it's still actually going to this day.
Awesome.
So whatever that is, 24, 25 years, whatever that is. We've actually turned it into Dynasty. We did get rid of the IDP part of it. Unfortunately, we all kind of grew up, got jobs, and can't really follow it quite as much as we used to.
Yeah.
So we went to just team defenses. We finally got rid of the kicker last year. The kicker's
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, that was my last league. That's the last one that was holding on to that kicker. They were holding on. I finally got them to kill the kicker. And but yeah, that league's been going on for quite a while. It's a group of guys that I've known for a very long time.
Awesome. And you answered my follow-up question, is that still going? And you mentioned some of the league settings. What are the other league settings? Like, is it 1 QB? Is it super flex? Talk to us about the league settings for that inaugural league of Geoff Lambert.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The guys I play with aren't, they're into fantasy football, but not quite the way I am. So they keep it pretty basic. It's 1 QB. We do, now that we got rid of the kicker, we added an extra flex spot. So we got 2 flex spots instead of just 1. So that's really the only difference. I do have return yardage is part of it. So if you have a receiver that gets return yardage, that's actually, he gets points for that. That's one thing that's a little bit different than most leagues. In defenses, the team defenses get half a point for a tackle for a loss, which is also not a standard thing to have. So there's defenses out there that can do really, really well. when they get a lot of those behind it. Because I view a tackle for a loss as basically a sack on a non-quarterback. Is the way I look at it. So
No,
it should count for something.
Totally agree. Shout out to Jordan Rains, I think 50 Shades of Drunk on Twitter. His IDP 1-2-3 scoring is similar to that, where like it takes into account all defensive plays. So tackles, assisted tackles, tackles for loss, passes deflected, all that stuff, and you actually get points for all of that. So it makes the defensive side of the ball even more valuable and more comparable to the offense. So I love that your team defenses even get a half a point for a tackle for loss. How many times have you won the league?
So officially 5 times. There's 2 that they won't recognize because they're the first few years I played, I wasn't the commissioner and I had a different email address and I won those first 2 years that we played. But then I took over the league and I changed the email address because it wasn't really appropriate email address. I was probably like in my early 20s, so it wasn't an appropriate email address. I changed it over, and because of that, those first 2 years were lost in the Yahoo history. So since then, I've won 3, but in my mind, I've still won 5.
Okay, that's respectable. That is very respectable, and I should expect nothing less from a savvy vet like yourself. So, what's up, Geoff and Nick and the Fantasy Sports Doc?
What's up, guys?
We got our friends and fam in the chat. And let me get back to our questions. Okay, so moving on from your first league, what's your favorite type of league to play in? What are your favorite league settings?
Superflex has been kind of becoming my favorite. For the longest time, I was a traditionalist, and I didn't really like the 2 QB situation. But
yeah,
I think my first year playing Superflex was in the Scott Fish Bowl. I was kind of forced into that, so I played it. I enjoyed it. I saw the difference in the leagues and how the quarterbacks are valued the way they are in the NFL. Quarterbacks are going in the first few rounds as they should. As opposed to in single quarterback leagues, they might go in like the 10th or the 8th round. You might be getting your number 1 quarterback. So I do see the difference there. I do like the super flex settings. I played in a couple other leagues that are a little bit more out there. Obviously, the guillotine leagues are pretty big.
Yeah,
I played in some vampire leagues. I did play in a guillotine league last year that I want to do again this year. It's actually a team-based guillotine league. So there was 4 divisions in 4 teams in each division. So it was a 16-team league. The 4 teams in your division, you were all one team. So you were basically, collaborating on your draft. Like, all right, let's all go quarterback this round. Let's all do this. And then during the week, if you had bye weeks, you're like, oh, I got Swift on a bye week. You would just text your friend like, hey, I see you have, Montgomery on your bench. Let's switch. I'll give you Swift for this week. You can put him on your bench. I need Montgomery on my lineup. So we would try to win that way. And then the guillotine part of it. So we got eliminated after a while. You're rooting for your teammates to kind of bring it home for your division. So it was a really cool format.
That's cool. So do you watch Big Brother on CBS?
I do not. Yeah, I do not.
Okay. So I won't ramble then too much, but this year for Big Brother, like the first couple of weeks, I think we just finished week 1. They're actually doing it in teams. So it sounds kind of like that with that guillotine league you were in, where basically like whoever the head of household is, their entire team is safe. And then there's been different little competitions so far where like if you win it, you can either like trade places with someone on the team that's safe, or you spin a wheel and whatever number you get, everyone, or you pick 1 person or 2 people or 3 people, depending on the number that you land on, and that many people from your team are safe. So is that kind of similar to the
very similar? Very similar. Yep. I'm actually working on my own sort of settings. I haven't been able to perfect it quite yet. I keep coming up with scenarios that kind of breaks it, but I'm calling it zombie leagues. It's basically one team's a zombie, kind of like vampire leagues, and they can't draft. They pick up from the waiver wires. The difference is in season, if the zombie beats you, he gets to take one of your players. You swap players just like a vampire league. But then you have to drop all your starters, and then you got to pick up from the waiver wire, and now you're also a zombie. So now there's 2 zombies in the league. Nice. I've kind of gone through different settings. I'm trying to find a scenario that kind of balances things out, because the big issue is waiver wire. Is like, how do the teams that are not zombies, how do they do waivers, and how do the teams that are zombies they get first dibs, and so I'm still trying to figure out the dynamics of it all. But I'm hoping to release that at some point, either this year or next year.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, especially if you're a Walking Dead fan like me. I was actually watching that before we hopped on. Because like I feel like with that, I don't know, I totally just lost my train of thought.
It happens.
But yeah, I feel like that'd be really cool. You'd have to figure out a way to like have custom waiver priority settings, I feel like.
Yep, and that's kind of what I was kind of coming to. It was like, okay, if a zombie wins in a certain week, then that team's gonna be dropping their starters. It's gonna be flooded with really good players.
Yeah.
So does everybody get to bid that first day on the players, including the teams that aren't zombies? And then after that first day, then the zombies can sort of add waivers whenever they want. That's kind of how I've kind of been thinking about it a little bit, because otherwise, if you let the zombies pick up that first day, only the zombies pick up, they're going to add all the good players, and then all of a sudden you got zombies that are like super zombies. And
super zombies, yeah, and we don't want super zombies. We
not.
Don't want World War Z zombies. We want Walking Dead zombies.
Yeah, there you go.
So, okay, so when did you start making content for fantasy football? You started playing in 96. When did you start making content?
I think it was 2015. So it's kind of funny. So the way it came about, I'm like I said, I'm a stat nerd, and I play fantasy football, and all my friends would text me on Sundays, who do I start? Who do I start? Or they text me on Tuesdays, like, who am I adding for waivers this week? I'd always get these questions all the time, even from guys that are in the leagues that I'm playing in would ask me questions about sit start. I'm like, dude, I'm literally in the same league as you. Why are you asking me these questions? But it was one particular week that I gave somebody at work a good start sit. I think actually it might have been a waiver wire. I think it was Devonta Freeman, I believe, the year he was the number one running back. I told him to add him off of waivers, and he just blew up and ended up being what he was. But he made a comment like, yeah, you should start a blog or something, man. People would follow you. And that's when the light bulb kind of went off. I was kind of like, all right. The funny thing is, though, is when I finally got around to figuring out how to do it and getting it started, my official launch date was like the week after the Super Bowl. So I basically just missed the whole season. Now I had a whole summer to go. We're trying to find ways to do content. And this was even before I played Dynasty. I didn't play Dynasty until I think 2016, which is the following year for me starting to do content.
Okay.
So I started writing NBA DFS. If you go back on my website and you scroll all the way back to the beginning of time, it was all NBA DFS because that's all that was playing right then. And I wanted to have something to write about. And NBA DFS at that time wasn't as big, so there wasn't many sites doing it.
Yeah.
My site kind of got a lot of hits really fast, and it kind of like, it opened my eyes. And I was kind of like, all right, this is going to be kind of fun. I thought I'd be trying to beg my friends and family to go there and read my stuff. But when I started seeing, you're getting thousands of hits a day on this NBA DFS stuff, I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And I kind of carried it through the summer. And then eventually, that first year with football was huge for me, DFS wise, season along the whole nine. So at that point, I had kind of built a brand for myself, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I didn't even think that I'd have writers working for me. I didn't even think about doing a podcast. None of that. It just all kind of fell into place.
Dude, that's awesome. Who's your favorite NBA team? This is totally not on the show sheet, but since you started NBA DFS, I have to ask.
So this is probably something you've never heard before because no one's a fan of this team, but it's the New Orleans Pelicans. That is my favorite team. And there's a story behind that. So I grew up in Newport News, which if you don't know where that's at, it's in Virginia. It's close enough to North Carolina that growing up, I had North Carolina radio TV stations on my channel. So I'd be able to watch North Carolina's local channels. And this was in 88, 89 when the Charlotte Hornets were first introduced into the league. They were an expansion team. I was new to the NBA. It was kind of a perfect match. Back then, it was the starter jackets were huge and everyone was wearing those colors. So I became a fan of the Charlotte Hornets. And, obviously they, moved to New Orleans and I followed them. My fandom kind of followed them there. They became the Pelicans. All the history went back to the Charlotte Hornets. So it's kind of weird now. My real NBA team, the Pelicans, doesn't have the history that I remember. I remember Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson, and all that history now is back with Charlotte. So it's a little bit of a weird thing, but I couldn't change my allegiance. I'd watched them for so long that I've been rooting for them. So I'm still rooting for the Pelicans.
Awesome. That's really cool. And y'all's best player,
Zion.
Zion Williamson, is actually near where I live now, or
Oh,
from
nice,
where I live near.
nice.
So my best friend and his wife, I think, went and watched him play in high school a couple years ago. Because
Nice.
they live here too. So they were all pumped about Zion and ready for Zion. And then I was holding out hope he wasn't going to go to Duke, and then he did. But he was still just so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
And still is. He's going to be great for the league. So I'm happy that you guys have him too. All right. Why did you start? Well, you kind of explained it, but so I guess I'm going to pivot a little bit from the show sheet. How did you get started in Dynasty? Did you start writing for it, or did you start playing it first?
So I started. So this is how Dynasty, the whole thing with Dynasty came about. I was always very good at. If I didn't do something, I found someone that did something. Even to this day, I don't play IDP leagues. I have a writer that does IDP, so he writes IDP for me. So I would bring people on my podcast, or I'd have writers writing for me that were doing Dynasty stuff. They'd come on and talk about Dynasty, and it just kind of piqued my interest. And I've been wanting to get my home league to become Dynasty, so I had to convince them to do a Dynasty league because they weren't really into it. And even the first couple of years, they still weren't really into it. It would go summer, and we'd have no transactions, no nothing. It was no engagement. It wasn't until Sleeper came about where I didn't have to do the spreadsheets in the off season because Yahoo didn't go through the whole off season. That they finally started getting very into it and doing trades in the off season, those kind of things. So it was a very slow process. I mean, I think I had people on my show doing the rookie stuff, and I didn't know any of the rookies. I still to this day don't watch college football. I don't learn these rookies' names until they actually. Yeah, I don't watch it. I work every Saturday, so I don't even have time to watch it. But yeah, I learn their names when the season's all said and done. I'll go back and I'll watch their tape and see the players that I like and just kind of do my own sort of film review. But yeah, I don't know any of the college players until they're actually becoming pros.
Wow, that's kind of impressive. But it doesn't your rookie love for the league that we were in together doesn't make sense now. So, wow, that's really interesting. Okay, cool.
I think so it's a disadvantage and an advantage because coming into that film watching, I have no bias. I have no preconceived notion like, oh, Jamar Chase is the best receiver. I don't know this, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to watch and see what I see, and then I make my own decisions. And I always try to do things before anybody else does them. It's kind of my thing. Even with DFS, I used to write DFS, NFL stuff, watching Monday Night Football for the next week. I would already have my stuff because the DraftKings releases their stuff kind of early. My thought process was I'm going to get my stuff out there with my opinions before I read other opinions that influence my opinion. Does that make sense? So I kind of did the same thing. I would just put it out there as fast as I could because it was my opinion. It was fresh. It was clean. Same thing with like the rookies. I don't want to be influenced by these guys saying, oh, this guy's great, and then go back in and then almost try to find the things that are great about them. This way I'm sort of blank slate. I go in and make my own decisions on them.
That's a good point too. And I actually when I'm watching, I kind of try to do the opposite because I do watch a little bit of college football. Well, that's probably an understatement, especially if you ask my wife. But I try and find flaws, see what they're not good at and what they where they need work on when I'm watching film. So, but I love that you have no preconceived notions. So you don't have, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have a favorite college football team.
Nope.
So you have nothing holding you to a guy before you start watching, and you start watching after.
If you ask me right now to name college teams in what conference they were in, I'd have no idea. SEC, ACC. I couldn't name them in any of them. I literally know nothing about college football. So I keep it really like I said, blank slate. It's all pros for me until they become pros or until they're getting ready to go into the pros. That's when I learn their names. Now I got Jeff Bell, who I don't know if he's still in the chat or not. He kind of talks some players up a little bit. So I'll have some general knowledge just based on, exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as knowing, even what team they play for, sometimes I just know the name. I don't even know what team they play for. So it's very blank slate when I go and look at the rookies.
That's awesome. Okay. What is your favorite thing about the fantasy football community?
That last word, the community part. I like, when I first started, I was a big Facebook person. I wasn't even on Twitter. I did a lot of Facebook groups, still have Facebook groups that I use and put my content in. And when I got on Twitter, I think in 2016, so I've been doing content now for over a year. Even at that point, it was just an automated program that would just put my articles over there. I didn't do any engagement. I didn't talk to anybody. I just kind of like, what? I'm just going to put it on Twitter. If I get 6 hits on this article, who cares? It's all about Facebook. I'm just putting it on Facebook. That's where I'm doing all my interaction. That's where I'm doing all my advice. It wasn't until I met Ryan, my co-host on my podcast. He was running a Facebook group that I'd post my content in. And actually, I had him and another guy on my podcast that was also running a Facebook group. We did kind of a Facebook group podcast battle where I had both of them on debating different topics from different, from both the Facebook groups. And then I'd bring Ryan on occasionally as a guest, and he'd come on and, he was kind of like the last minute guy, like, oh shit, my guy just canceled on me. Hey, Ryan, can you jump on? And Ryan would come on and he would jump on. And then he started getting me into Twitter. He started talking about more and more of these Twitter, things going on. He sent me like tweets and stuff like that. So I started getting more and more into it. And then before long, I'm knee deep in Twitter, and Facebook has now become the afterthought, and Twitter is more of my thing now. So it's just funny how things changed like that and the way things happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually just added me to a Facebook group, and I need to probably interact on that a little more. But yeah, it's cool because like I started on Twitter and like started at 0 followers and have grown to what I'm at now. But like the community is the best part because like it's helped build me to get there. I've met friends like you and like Jay and I are like this, like best friends for life now. And there's so many other friendships that I've made that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the community of fantasy football.
Absolutely.
And shout out to Scott Fish and the Scott Fish Bowl, because that's the real underlying purpose of Scott Fish Bowl, and that's how you meet people in the community, and I love that aspect of it as well. So
yep, definitely. I mean, Ryan got me in a Scott Fish Bowl too. As a matter of fact, 4 years ago, we finished up a podcast, and he looks at his phone and he goes, "Yes, I got in the Scott Fish Bowl." And I was like, "What the hell is a Scott Fish Bowl?" And he's like, "Oh, you started telling me about it. That sounds pretty cool. Let me just go apply really quick." And I applied like literally a month before the actual thing was supposed to, when it was all said and done. And I got invited. I was surprised I got invited, and I've been invited ever since. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I knew nothing about it when I was on Twitter, back then.
No, I didn't either. Honestly, I think I applied last year, kind of like you did, a month before, maybe 2 months before, and then Ryan McDowell shouted out the astronauts from his Twitter account, and then like the next day or so, a bunch of us got in.
Nice,
including me, and I was like, "All right, cool." And then from there, it just blew up, and it was so much fun. So, and then I started my own charity tournament. So, but this isn't about me. All right, who's your favorite?
Actually, real quick on that charity note, let me just grab something really quick. I wanted to show you something.
Yeah, absolutely.
A quick plug, if you will.
Of course.
So we actually run a charity DFS tournament, and we just got the belt in just recently that we'll be giving away.
Oh, that is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a week 1 tournament. It's not like a full long season. If anybody plays DFS out there, we basically have a small GPP type style set up. And then whoever wins that week gets the belt. It's all for charity. It's free to get into the league. The donations are optional. But if you go to goingfor2.com/21grinder, we call it the Grinders Championship, because if you're a DFS player, you're a grinder, because that's what you do. You just grind daily. So yeah, just go to goingfor2.com/ I think it's either 21 grinder or grinder 21.
Okay. Yeah, I will. Yes, Nick, that belt is dope. So, yeah, shoot that over to me, Geoff, whenever you figure it out, and I will add it to show notes and tweet it out as well.
I haven't promoted it heavy yet because I've noticed in years past when doing this that until I have the DraftKings link to the contest, no one wants to sign up. Once I have the actual link to the contest, then I can get people to sign up. So I haven't plugged it too hard just yet.
That makes sense. Okay. Who is your favorite NFL team?
The 49ers. It's been my team for, going back all the way into 83, 84, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
The Montana and Jerry Rice days. My first vivid memory. Now I've watched a lot of Super Bowls before this game, but if you were to tell me, the moment that I became a football fan, it was the Bengals and the 49ers Super Bowl when Joe Montana drove down 90 yards, threw the touchdown pass to John Taylor in the end zone and won. That's when I became a football fan, because that was the only game that I can remember in that time where it was close. Back then, it was like blowouts. I mean, it was always blowouts.
Yeah,
the game was over by the first quarter, by the first half, and it was pretty much over. So that was the first game that I can remember where it was actually a close game. I was into it to the fourth quarter, rooting for my guy Jerry Rice. My favorite player is Jerry Rice, and I think he had a huge game. It may even be still the record-breaking game in that Super Bowl, and then, of course, John Taylor wins it for him, and I was a fan from there ever since.
Nice. So is Jerry Rice the GOAT of all receivers?
Oh yeah, it's no question. Okay. I always do this argument where it's like, is it, can you pick a quarterback? Can you do a receiver? Can you do a running back? For me, if you do quarterback, as greatest of all time, there's a debate. I know Tom Brady, he's now since kind of separated himself a little bit, but there's still people that want to debate Joe Montana. There's still people that want to debate, different quarterbacks, and there's some say Peyton Manning was the best talent-wise. Same thing with running back. You go to running back, you Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders.
You must know your host well. Peyton Manning is my favorite player, has been since I was a kid. So
nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. But yeah, when you go to receiver, you get very few arguments that it's not Jerry Rice. I mean, people want to throw in Randy Moss, they want to throw in Terrell Owens, but when Rice was better than most of them after age 35. If you look at his numbers, he's still better than them. You know what I mean? So Rice is so far and above everybody else that it's definitely Rice for me.
Yeah, well, and I think that it wasn't even a passing league like back then. Like imagine his talent now in a passing NFL. Yep. He would have. I mean, I feel like he would have just blown people out of the water with how good and how talented he was. So I have no arguments with that. So yeah, I like that. And you explained why you were a fan. So that was going to be my follow-up question. All right. What is your favorite sport that is not football?
Favorite sport is definitely basketball. I grew up playing basketball.
Even above football?
If I'm playing it, yes.
Okay.
If I'm watching it, it's football. Yeah. If I'm gonna go out, hey, I want to play football or basketball, I'm gonna go play basketball. Especially at my age, I'm 44 years old. I've got bad knees and a bad back, so football ain't happening at this age. But I played basketball. I actually, when I was in high school, played basketball against Allen Iverson. So that's kind of cool.
Kidding.
Yeah, I grew up in that area where it was Iverson was winning championships, and then Michael Vick was there as well. He was also in that same time frame. So I got to see both of them play in high school because they were both in the same area that I grew up in. But I didn't play football in high school, but I did play basketball, and I played against Allen Iverson, which he's not 6 foot, by the way. I know his NBA thing says he's 6 foot. Trust me, I was 6 foot in high school, and he was shorter than me, so I know he's not 6 foot. But they do kind of fudge that a little bit. But he was, unbelievable. Like, you just knew this kid was special. I mean, it was like, like you don't realize like the NBA talent and how it is and how fast everything moves until you see someone like Allen Iverson literally in front of you, trying to guard him. It's impossible. You can't do it.
No. Back home in Birmingham, I played with a guy. He played for University of Detroit, and I swear to God, the dude doesn't have hip flexors because of how fluid and smooth and the way that he moves. It's just like you're not human, dude.
Yep.
And in that same home pickup league, I've actually played with Alonzo G that played at Alabama and then played in the NBA. So, little humble brag there. Alonzo G actually said that I was a good shooter. So
nice. Iverson doesn't know my name, so I can't claim that. He wouldn't even know who I was.
Yeah. What's up, Dan? Happy to have you in the comments. So, okay, so favorite sport is basketball. Favorite team there is the Pelicans. Favorite NFL team is the 49ers. Who's your before I move on to the last question, who's your favorite NBA player?
That's tough. I mean, it's got to be Michael Jordan.
Okay.
That's basically he's what got me into the NBA. He's what got me into watching the NBA. It was Michael Jordan. Modern day players, it's tough. I wanted to say Anthony Davis, but he burned me too bad, so I can't go with Anthony Davis. I do like Chris Paul, even though he also burned us and went to LA. I'm rooting for him in the finals. Hope he can get his championship. I really like Chris Paul. He plays his heart out, and everywhere he's been, they've been a winning team. So Chris Paul is definitely awesome, and I think Chris Paul ranks up there as maybe top 8 point guards of all time. So I think Chris Paul is my modern day favorite player.
Nice, I love it. All right, cool. So last question before we wrap up. What hobbies do you have outside of fantasy football?
So photography. Before I got into fantasy football, I own a lot of high-end professional equipment. Unfortunately, I don't get as much time to use it as I used to. But I do pull it out for like holidays and stuff, and I get family pictures and stuff like that. But yeah, I live right near DC. I take my camera and we just go walk around DC for hours. And people go to DC to take tourist photos. I was going to DC to take pictures of the tourists. I was like the street photography. I was the one trying to get the pictures of the guy skateboarding, at a Washington Monument skateboarder or something like that. I wasn't looking at the monuments and the historical effect. I was looking at the people that were there to do stuff. So that's kind of how I was doing my photography back then. Unfortunately, I got a daughter now, and it's a whole lot harder to get those kind of things done. And whenever free time I do have, I'm doing fantasy football now, so I don't get as much time to do it anymore.
Well, that's cool. See, that's the whole point of this show is you get to learn something that you didn't know about your favorite analysts and people in the fantasy football industry. Geoff, I'm going to throw it up on the ticker. First off, thanks again for coming on for the inaugural episode. Thank you for being a friend and a mentor and taking me under your wing as we go on this journey of www.ffcollectiv.com. I really appreciate you. And Jay, I know I've said his name 14,000 times, it feels like, in this episode. But Jay always told me how good of a dude and a person you were. And then I actually got to work with you and for you. And I was like, yeah, everything you said, 100% true. You're awesome. Tell us where people can find you again and anything that you're working on or want to plug.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for the kind words. And Jay is like my hype man. I've gotten multiple writers that have come to me because of Jay, hyping me up in some other retweet group. Like, hey, if you're getting your start, come to Going for Two, and I've gotten a bunch of guys that have started with me. Some of the guys have actually gone on to have jobs, like not in fantasy football, but as writers or editors because they started with here and had a sort of a portfolio. So it's kind of cool to watch that. And I do give guys their first chance. A lot of guys that have started with me was their first opportunity to write, and they go on to do bigger and better things. So pretty cool. And again, thanks for having me on. I love having you on the Going for Two team. Getting on some of our podcasts. Hopefully you can come on this season on the Armchair Fantasy Show as well. Of course, you can follow me, guys, right there, at Geoff Lambert 77. It's spelled a little different, Geoff. But yeah, definitely give me a follow and ask questions. I'm always answering my DMs. My DMs are open. So if you have any questions on anything DFS related or fantasy football related, just hit me up. I'm usually pretty good about answering all those questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Guys, make sure you follow our Twitter at @FF_collective. That is also spelled a little different. It is KOLLECTIV. You can follow my podcast, The Fantasy Nightcap, up there in the top right corner at Fantasy Nightcap. And then you can find me on Twitter at FFShaneB. I write for The Kollectiv and I write for Geoff at goingfor2.com. So I actually have an article that I have planning to come out for both websites soon. Nice. So thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kollectiv Knowledge with your host, Shane Barrett.